Hello, manic.mercurian here, and in this video we're going to be tackling another birth chart reading. Before we do that, I did want to mention if you are interested in getting a reading just like this one, you can definitely check out my website, manic.mercurian.net. It's in the description as usual, and there you'll find information on readings, and then you can also purchase readings directly through there. The rate for a reading like this right now is $30 US currency, which is, I feel like that's pretty low. This is a pretty quality reading for that rate. So if you're interested in that, I really do appreciate the business. It's what allows me to keep putting time into the channel, keeping the channel going, the content coming, things like that. So really do appreciate it a lot. Plus it's a lot of fun to tackle birth charts like this. Yes, and I did want to give thanks to this person for allowing me to post this reading publicly. It's definitely not a requirement. If you do want a reading from me, I can definitely post a video like this privately so that only you can see it. But I do, sometimes ask if I can post publicly just because it helps me get views and things like that. And it's kind of like advertising for me, I guess. But for this reading, this will be for Thursday, July 19th, 1984 at 12:49 p.m. in Daleville, Alabama. It's nice to get some more southern charts on the board. I had one in Georgia, now one in Alabama, so I'm filling in my map at home. But this means that you have Sun in Cancer, Moon in Aries with Libra rising. I'm going to go on a quick tangent here because the first thing I noticed when I pulled up your chart isn't something that specifically has to do with one or even two placements. It's something that runs through your whole chart. As soon as I pulled up your chart, it stood out to me as a really charismatic chart. Sun in Cancer conjunct the midheaven, and it's a very tight conjunction. I'm sure I'm going to talk a lot about that in this reading, so I'm going to come back to that. But Sun conjunct the midheaven in Cancer, Venus in Leo, Mercury in Leo, Moon in Aries, Libra ascendant, Mars in Scorpio. These placements are all very different, but the one common thread that runs through all of them is really strong charisma. Also having Sun exactly conjunct the midheaven with Mercury and Venus in the 10th house. This is a dynamic that I see I see dynamics similar to this in the charts of celebrities. Having many planets, especially personal planets, in the 10th house and or conjunct the midheaven, like we see here. Lots of celebrities have charts like that. Plus, having Mercury and Venus in Leo, which is fire, Moon in Aries, which is fire, and then Sun in Cancer, which is water. Many celebrities, outgoing personalities have a lot of fire energy, sometimes water too, because water signs such as Cancer are emotional, so they're passionate, they're creative. They can sometimes be musicians or actors, but fire signs especially, though, can be celebrities in general. They're outspoken, they're outgoing. Combining this fire energy and then especially putting Mercury, Venus, and Sun at the top of the chart, this means that you're going to naturally feel really comfortable in very public arenas. So being, the center of attention, being in public in general, working on your career, being at work, out in the world, doing something, these are going to be your comfort areas. So this creates a really strong dynamic. So that's something that I first noticed looking at your chart. You also have South Node in Sagittarius. We'll talk more about that later, but there's a lot of confidence that comes with a lot of these placements. So you're likely very relatable. Others relate to you. You have an enthusiastic energy about you. You're outgoing, you're lively, you're fun, you're energetic. You do have Sun in Cancer, but really, most of your other personal planets are in fire signs. So in other words, most people who have Sun in Cancer will be, emotional, sensitive. They'll be a little bit guarded, but they also love connecting with others. You may relate to some of these traits, but, this is kind of overshadowed by this fire influence. Mercury, Venus, Moon, South Node, even Mars and Scorpio to some extent, even though technically that's water. All of these are kind of fiery placements, meaning that you're very passionate, outgoing, confident. What else? It may be very easy for you to initiate in general, to make the first move, to be ambitious, energetic, lively, that type of thing. That's why so many actors have a lot of fire signs in their charts, because they're the center of attention. They're being lively. They're being, very expressive, very outspoken, and they do so in a way that's relatable for everyone. So anyway, you may not necessarily be an actor, but I'm just illustrating these themes because, that's kind of what comes to mind looking at your chart. So really interesting stuff, kind of exciting. Let's see here. Sun is in Cancer, though, so there is a lot of emotion there. You may be sensitive at times, but because you have all these other fire placements, you may actually, you're probably a lot more direct and outspoken and maybe a little bit more blunt than, perhaps the typical Cancer Sun person would be. You're not, you may have your moments where you can be sensitive, but for the most part, you would enjoy kind of, crass humor, like, you don't mind if others act in a very direct way and kind of just shoot from the hip, because you would do so yourself to a large extent as well. Okay, and then we talked a lot about you being very direct, fiery, outspoken, charismatic. I did want to mention something a little bit different. So Moon is in Aries, so that would typically indicate, a lot of really strong charisma, relatability, others relate to you. The emotions can be a bit volatile there, especially considering you have Sun in Cancer as well. So there can be some kind of volatility, fluctuations there. It's just that you feel so strongly that it can sometimes, I don't want to say blinded by it, but it's like all you can see is what you're feeling sometimes because you're feeling so strongly. So that can be a challenge, managing that level of feeling and passion, but it can also be an advantage too. It gives you a lot of, it makes you very captivating. It makes others listen to you because you can come across so, assured of yourself. And it can also give you a lot of passion that allows you to push things through to accomplish things, especially things which require immediate action, quick timing, that type of thing. So there is that. That's typically what Moon and Aries would entail. So that, you would definitely experience a lot of that, most likely. However, Moon is in 6th house, which is very different. Typically, when we have Moon in 6th house, we are a little bit... Typically, it would make a person kind of shy, very independent, maybe intellectual. They kind of think for themselves. They have unique opinions on things. They may be very humble. It's a really humbling placement. So, to be honest, it's actually a little bit difficult for me as an astrologer to put those things together because they're so different. On the one hand, you have Moon in Aries with all these other fire placements and these placements at the top of your chart, which suggest that you're very confident, very outgoing, as I've said. But then at the same time, Moon in 6th house suggests that you may have your moments of maybe solitude or feeling misunderstood, feeling kind of like you're on the outside. I'm not sure exactly how that would work. These are two kind of opposing themes, but both may be true for you somehow. Let's see. And then what else can we talk about? Part of the reason why I say that you are likely very charismatic is you don't technically have a lot of planets in domicile, but you do have a lot of placements which are naturally strong, I guess I could say. So Venus in Leo, for example, it's not technically in domicile, but Venus, thrives there. And also being at the top of your chart, this means that the Venusian qualities of being attractive, being charming, having others feel comfortable around you and having others enjoy engaging with you, all of that is going to be very strong with Venus in Leo in the 10th house. And it's especially going to come out when you're in public, when you're in the limelight, things like that. What else can we talk about? Mercury is in 10th house Leo. So this means that the way you communicate is going to be very, self-assured and confident. And this makes you an excellent leader as well, being able to handle, the attention and stand up in front of others and take the plunge, literally be a leader, be an initiator, things like that. Definitely reinforced by your fire placements in general, but Mercury in 10th house Leo is a part of that. Your communication is very straightforward, easy to understand, and it comes across confident. So if it sounds like I'm, trying to flatter you, I'm really not. It's just that you have a lot of placements which are overtly strong in a way that's innate, where you don't necessarily have to develop them early on. And there's pros and cons to everything. We're going to talk more about your challenges later in the reading very soon. But right off the bat, I think especially when people meet you, they would be very captivated by you because you just seem so easy. You seem easy to get to know and be around. So relatable, so maybe funny or relatable. Others understand you. They enjoy your company, generally speaking. To go in a slightly different direction, I'm kind of all over the place here, but like we've said, there's lots of placements which suggest that you're very outgoing, but to sort of balance this and mediate this a little bit is your Libra rising. So Libra rising shows that the way you initiate is you may actually sort of observe before you initiate. So on the one hand, yes, you are, in 99.9% of situations, you're more than comfortable taking the first step, being that initiator. But at the same time, you're also comfortable kind of hanging back and observing if you feel like you need to. Libra rising also shows that you have some level of, being very diplomatic, being a mediator, being receptive to others. So that is a really balancing placement, I think, to have, in combination with your fire placements. You are mostly outgoing and maybe a bit egocentric at times, but Libra rising does indicate that you have some level of, you can listen to others too. It's not all just you talking and doing things. You have some level of being receptive as well and being able to, sit and listen to some extent. So that is very good, I guess, or it's very balancing, I should say. Let's talk about your first house. And I believe the last reading I did, I mentioned how, when you have planets in the first house, they become very dominant. They sort of overflow into the rest of the chart. In other words, the traits or the themes of the planets that you have in the first house kind of permeate your whole essence, your whole personality is very much influenced by what's in your first house. So for you, you have a whole bunch of planets there. You have Pluto, Saturn, and Mars. Okay. And that realization I just had is, for many people born in 1984, there was this pretty unusual conjunction of all the malefics, the Pluto, Saturn, and Mars, like you have here in Scorpio. You also have South Node in Scorpio. So that is a huge area that is very challenging, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Specifically, I'm going to talk about how there are major challenges there, which will likely take you a long time to feel more comfortable with. But we're going to talk about that very soon. But more broadly speaking, having Pluto, Saturn, and Mars in the first house and South Node in the first house. So on the one hand, this is just more energy supporting you being an individual, you being flashy and outgoing, you handling attention very well. It's a lot of really strong placements, almost, maybe too many. There can definitely be challenges with having a lot of placements that are just, ready to go and already developed like this. But on the other hand, Pluto, Saturn, Mars, these are malefics, like I mentioned. So this means that, they're kind of like the troublemakers in astrology. So on the one hand, this could mean that you embody this energy. You may struggle with this. Pluto's in the first house. It's very close to the ascendant. So this means that this kind of makes you a little bit like a Scorpio, where there's an intensity about you and there's a magnetism there. This kind of boosts your charisma even more because others are captivated by you. You seem powerful to people. When people are first meeting you, they don't know you. You strike them as powerful. You strike them as interesting or mysterious. They feel like you have like a plot or a plan, a strategy. Even when you may not, even when you're just casually minding your own business, doing your own thing, you come across in a way that's powerful or mysterious. Others feel like you're in control, like there's something going on inside, maybe mentally that They don't know exactly what it is, but they just feel like there's something there. So it's a really great placement to have for being a leader. It can be confusing though. It can make others fear you or despise you, because there's that mysteriousness. Others may not fully understand you. Now, again, take that with a grain of salt, because I already mentioned how you have all these fire placements. For the most part, others, they at least feel like they understand you very readily. But on the other hand, Pluto near the ascendant can indicate that mysteriousness. Quick correction for myself too. I didn't realize Pluto's actually at the last degree of Libra. It's not quite in Scorpio. But also Saturn and Mars in first house. So both of these are great for being a leader as well. Really, Pluto, Saturn, and Mars. These are malefic energies. They can be troublesome. But on the other hand, they're all very sort of masculine planets, and they're all disrupting energies. So that can bring conflict and chaos. But on the other hand, some level of conflict or disruption is a better word. Some level of disruption is needed to make change, basically. So yes, this could make you come across as disruptive or agitating at times, but really it's you could also just say that you're ambitious. You are, you know what you want, you know how to initiate certain things. And of course, I think the bigger your desires are, the more you want to change things. Of course, it's going to disrupt things by its very nature. If you're changing something, it's disturbing the status quo. So there could be some level of conflict or chaos there, if that makes sense. Others may not always be receptive to your ambitions, to your plans, to your actions. So on the one hand, this could be difficult because of the chaos that this brings to your whole identity, for yourself as well as other people. But on the other hand, this is empowering in the sense that it allows you to be extremely ambitious and know how to start things, know how to launch projects or plans, if that makes sense. I'll just sum it up real simple. So you are a disruptor, for better or for worse, if that makes sense. So definitely very powerful, but it can also make others kind of hate you. So really, part of why I'm so excited is because this chart seems like you're very others definitely notice you. You know what I mean? Others may have very strong opinions about you. Mars in the first house makes you very ambitious, very attuned to your desires, especially because Mars is in domicile in Scorpio. It's very strong there. So you're a very instinctual person, very ambitious. You know what you want and how to get it. You're willing to put in the work to get what you want. And then Saturn in first house all this could be initially very challenging. Growing up, I would speculate your childhood would be very intense. We'll talk more about that later. But Saturn in first house indicates that you want, well, really all three of these planets in first house indicate that you want power, you want status, you want the ability to be free and get what you want, basically. You have so many desires. You want the power to achieve whatever you want, whenever you want. And this is something that it's not really a goal, because it's always going to be more. You're always going to want more. You're always going to be working toward the next project, looking for a problem to fix, looking for the next hurdle to jump, looking for the next mountain to climb is a better analogy. So again, this could be disruptive, but it also shows that you have intense and immense potential to accomplish a lot, for sure. Really interesting stuff. What else can we talk about here? I think that's the gist of it. So very eccentric, very outgoing personality, someone that is probably loved by most people, but definitely hated by some, perhaps. Outgoing, generally embraced by everyone, but sometimes, you may feel very alone at times as well. Okay, let's get into your past lives, your upbringing, and then major challenges that you're experiencing as well in this life, and then where you're going from there, where your evolution is kind of taking you in this life and beyond. So first, for past lives, you have your South Node at 5 degrees Sagittarius. It's actually conjunct Uranus. Not a very tight conjunction, but it's there. So South Node conjunct Sagittarius, when it comes to specific details regarding your past lives, for South Node and Sagittarius, I can't get super specific because by its very nature, it could be applied in many different ways. Sagittarius has to do with exploration, adventure, experiencing different cultures, different ways of life. So in a past life, or maybe multiple past lives, this is the theme that you mastered, you spent the most time on and really experienced. So you may have been a traveler, a business person, a priest, someone who in some kind of way dealt with exploration, in a really big way. So whether that be like literally physically traveling across the world, or traveling, expanding consciousness through the mind too, through philosophy, higher learning. That's kind of what you dealt with in a past life. This is even strengthened further because South Node is conjunct Uranus. So this sort of this indicates that you would have been very eccentric, very unique, and maybe a bit of a genius. So you may have had, revolutionary ideas. You may have been ahead of your time in past lives. What else? On the one hand, you may have influenced a lot of people and connected with many people of different backgrounds, different walks of life. But on the other hand, you may have been very eccentric. So others may not have always understood you. You may have worked with ideas that others didn't always understand, things of that nature. So coming into this life, from day one, from the very beginning, you start out very confident, especially in terms of what you believe. You're confident in your beliefs. South Node and Sagittarius can make you, it's sort of like the archetype of the preacher. So someone who, has their truth and they speak their truth, someone who's very passionate about the truth and knows exactly what they believe in. That's kind of what you're all about. This is who you were in past lives. This is who you are now. And this is especially prevalent in childhood too. So you may have been especially confident and unwilling to budge on things that had to do with your beliefs. So whether that be moral beliefs or just beliefs about the world and the cosmos, all of this you are naturally very confident about, if that makes sense. So there is a lot of strength here. The nodes are actually in domicile where you have. So that just means that this is a naturally strong position that you have. It's really kind of convenient coming into the world, having such strong beliefs, knowing what you believe in, knowing your sense of right and wrong maybe, or your kind of moral compass. Whatever it is for you, you're very sure about it. So you can skip a lot of the lack of clarity that so many of us others who don't have this placement have to go through, before we settle on what we believe about the world, if that makes sense. So another really strong placement for you, but the challenge here is that the more you stick with the themes of your South Node, so in this case, the more you stick to your truth, it's great that you have your truth and that you don't budge on it, but if you only stick to that, you'll never branch out, you'll never learn anymore. And also, you may be driven to spread your truth to others, and you may want to, again, it's kind of like the preacher in a way, so you may be drawn toward that kind of modality. But if you're only preaching your truth in a completely raw, unfiltered way, that's great for being, speaking your truth and sticking to it, but others may not always be so ready to hear it. Others may come from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different ways of seeing things. And so on the other side of the chart, what North Node and Gemini is suggesting is, learn to work with other people. It's great that you're so confident. It's great that you have a vision, but you really can't do a whole lot with those things if you don't learn to hear other people and see where are they at. You may need to meet them halfway in order to persuade them, or in order to, maybe you'll learn something, or maybe meeting them halfway is what it takes to bring them to your side. Either way, North Node in Gemini is suggesting to be more flexible, learn to be a bit detached, which I think is something that you may struggle with. You are more oriented toward being very passionate, being in the moment and feeling so strongly. This is what allows you to be so creative and accomplish a lot. You're so focused on your desires and your ambitions. All that is great. That's excellent. But if you never take a breath of fresh air and just step back from a moment, you may not fully get the kind of clarity that you could if you learned to operate with a little bit of detachment. Hopefully that makes sense. What else? Pretty much that was kind of a long ramble, but that's what the nodal axis is showing for you. Also, when we take into account the houses, South Node is in 2nd house Sagittarius, North Node is in 8th house Gemini. So again, it's showing that you come into this world being very autonomous, very independent. I'm going to do things my way. I don't care what anyone else says. Again, that's really great that you have that confidence, that vision, and that clarity. This level of confidence is what makes you such a great leader and what allows you to accomplish so much, because you don't have to waste time like many, of us others would on figuring out, what do we want? How do I get it? You just know these things. So when I talk about this, I'm not saying that this is a problem at all. There's intense strengths here for sure. But again, you can go even farther with those strengths if you combine the themes of the North Node, which in this case have to do with working with other people, learning when to rely on other people, communicating more, being more receptive, hearing other people. North Node's in Gemini, and it's an 8th house Gemini, which has everything to do with, relying on other people, working on projects which might require cooperation, things like that. Okay, so I'm kind of laying it on thick. I always do in this part of the reading. So while we're on these, themes of challenges and things like that, let's talk about your Saturn, because that's another area of challenge for us. So this is going to get real deep and dark, partially because it's Saturn we're talking about. But for you, it is... for you, Saturn's in Scorpio, and Scorpio has to do with things that are kind of private and intense. So that's, I'm just warning you, that's kind of where we're going to go here for a moment. Okay, so with Saturn in Scorpio, this is a subgenerational placement. So anyone born, give or take a year from you is going to also have Saturn in Scorpio as well. So this is a bit of a broad placement. But typically when we have Saturn in Scorpio, it makes us experience challenges early on having to do with intimacy, sexuality, and emotional vulnerability. All of those things may be very difficult for you early in life, and you may have traumatic experiences with things like that. This is strengthened or this whole theme is strengthened and becomes stronger, more relevant for you because of Mars in Scorpio as well. It's pretty close. Pluto is at the last degree of Libra in the 1st house. So really all of these are suggesting, they're all indicating that basically just that you may have trauma, struggles with relying on other people early in life. So this kind of leads you to be closed off. And I think early in life, you may be tempted to just work on your own. I'm not going to listen to other people. I'm not going to rely on them. Maybe someone let you down early in life in a really big kind of way, or maybe someone, there could have been like a more violent type of situation or something. Things like that. It does get really intense, when you have Saturn and Mars in Scorpio. So it is very dark early on, but this will get easier over time. This may take a while though because Mars is with Saturn in Scorpio. But over time, the challenge is learning to work with other people. Really, this is kind of similar to your North Node as well. So it's showing that this is a really big theme for you. This is really difficult. I think especially combining this with all your fire placements, those other things that we talked about, it paints the picture of you being very likable. Everyone likes you. Generally speaking, you captivate people. But, I think that's where it can be lonely, that, you can say the right things to please everyone. But at the end of the day, are you truly relying on others? Is that, that may not necessarily be the same as intimacy, being on stage and performing in some kind of way. This could be an analogy or it could be literal. That everyone in the room may love you, but then at the same time, it's like, is that intimacy though? Can you really rely on others? So this is kind of the struggle that you deal with, especially early in life, but over time, this will get easier. This is, what typically happens with Saturn, especially, having gone through your Saturn return. So age 28, 29, 30, a lot of these issues may have come up in a big way. But typically, we rise to the challenge, we experience those issues, and we are stronger for it coming on the other side. We're better for it. So especially getting into your 30s, and then beyond, you may actually become especially secure intimately. It's just that you had to go through that whole road, the trials and tribulations of creating that security for yourself. Because you went through first the lack of this security and then the creation of it on your own, that's what allows you to be such an expert, such a master in this area later in life, having gone through that experience, if that makes sense. So yes, particularly dark stuff, but there is the potential for you to be, especially secure, especially able to have intimate relationships and to know when to rely on others, to know when to be emotionally vulnerable. All that, I'm sure you've already been working on cultivating those things, but it will only grow with time, for sure. Okay, so yeah, definitely some themes that are running through the whole chart, I would say. Okay, yeah, those are the main challenges I see for you. There's not many of them, but the ones that are there that I was just talking about are pretty intense, pretty overarching, I would say. Okay, so we talked about past lives, we talked about, major challenges, and hopefully I painted, I illustrated where those challenges are leading you, where you're evolving to. Basically, you're evolving, you're coming from a place of being very passionate, being very independent, being very outspoken. You have those strengths, but learning to cooperate with other people, have true relationships, partnerships, but also cooperating with other people, maybe professionally or in other areas. That's what's going to take you to the next level. That's, I think, what you're here to learn to some extent. And then that will help to erase this melancholy that I think is there. I don't think that others would know that you ever experienced these feelings of melancholy or feelings of isolation, but it's a struggle. It's something that will get easier with time and probably already has gotten easier throughout your life. And then eventually having those really strong relationships, whether they be professional, romantic, family, whatever. I think building those strong relationships is something that you need, so hopefully I'm sure you've already accomplished a lot there, but okay, that's all I'll say on that. Okay, let's talk about your childhood and upbringing just a little bit. I promise hopefully it's not going to be as intense or dark as that. Okay, so mostly I look to the IC and the South Node. We already talked about South Node and Sagittarius. This paints the picture of a kid who's very outgoing, outspoken, very gregarious, very adventurous. There's that charisma that's already there. So you're charismatic as an adult and probably a pretty charismatic child as well. What else? Outspoken, to the point. You'd basically be like Sagittarius as a kid. Also, South Node is conjunct Uranus, so very eccentric, very ahead of your time, very precocious, very intelligent. You're a quick learner as a child for sure, and in the rest of your life too. But particularly as a child, you really caught on to things very quickly. We're combining that with IC and Capricorn, so this is a difficult placement as well. This indicates that as a child, you may have had to kind of fend for yourself to some degree. You weren't always mollycoddled. You at a young age, you learned to rely on yourself, not just materialistically. So, for example, you may have started working early, things like that, but also emotionally as well. You learn to deal with your own emotions internally too. This is another placement that will make it difficult to relate to others or to open up and be emotionally vulnerable, because it's something that growing up you just learned not to do. You learned to handle yourself basically. So this is a difficult placement, but it is something that I think creates admirable people, because it indicates that you deal with your own stuff. You're self-sufficient. You have high standards for yourself. So these things were there from very early on. It's because of your childhood. It may have been a little bit. So typically with Capricorn, I see your parents were either they could have been negligent or abusive, but it may have been that your parents were very loving and that they were just strict with you. You know what I mean? But whatever the situation was, you had to be tough. You had to rely on yourself, basically. So definitely a hard placement, but it's something that makes you very resilient, capable, self-sufficient, things like that. Okay, and then lastly, we can look to the angle that the moon and sun make to each other to get a little bit more information on the dynamics you had at home. So for you, sun and moon are loosely squaring. Sun is in Cancer, moon is in Aries. These are two very different signs from one another. So this means that your parents were likely very different from one another. They may have had different personalities. If you grew up with just one parent or one person, that one person may have had a lot of contrast within themselves and behaved differently at different times. But if it was both parents, then these, they were very different from each other. They had different standards for you, different expectations. So as a kid, this is confusing. There's more contrast to deal with. But this contrast allows you to build more empathy, allows you to understand where other people are coming from, because you can hold two ideas in your head at the same time, working with energies that are very different. You know what I mean? And this also allows you to understand complex concepts as well, too. So again, this is a little bit more on the challenging side, but it's this contrast in your home growing up that created your restlessness, but also your ability to be empathetic, understand complex concepts, things like that. That's kind of how I see it mostly. It's very interesting. Saturn is direct and in the first house. Sun is conjunct the midheaven. So that indicates your father was likely very present in your life. You had a father who may have been traditionally masculine, very paternal, and was very present in your life. And it shows that there's like a direct connection between you and your father. And that may not necessarily always be good. It could be a very positive relationship, but either way, there's just a very direct connection there. Like you're in communication with your father, and had a very close relationship with him. Your mother, because moon is in the 6th house, typically when we have placements near the descendant like this, our parents don't always understand us. So it looks like one of your parents had a very close understanding relationship with you more so than the other one. I would lean toward the father being a lot closer to you. And, these things aren't always accurate, but that's what I would speculate based on your placements. Moon can often represent the mother. It's in the 6th house, so it doesn't really have an angle with the ascendant. That means that, your mother may have expected something different from you than what you actually turned out to be, or she may have not always understood you. There just wasn't a connection there. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, I guess. Okay. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about the challenges, upbringing. I know that was kind of dark, really, but I think it's this overall. It does look like a relatively challenging background, but I think this is what allows you to be so. You come across so confident and so easy. Others may not realize that these things come from a place of maybe overcoming hardship to some extent. That's where you get this ability to be so confident and outgoing in a way. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about your career. What would you be good at, career-wise? What do you need from a career? We could talk about your reputation a little bit more. So I already mentioned at the beginning, your chart to me is reminiscent of the chart of a celebrity. I already mentioned being an actor. Like, that would be something that wouldn't surprise me with your fire placements, or being a musician, a performer. A lot of that comes to mind with your fire placements and your sun in Cancer. Now, it's interesting that on the one hand, you have Sun conjunct midheaven, Venus and Mercury in 10th house. All of this indicates you being very public, out in the world, doing things, in a loud kind of way, in a very visible way. You thrive in public. You thrive in the limelight, in the spotlight. But on the other hand, you have midheaven in Cancer, which typically would indicate that you're working with the home, working in the home. I've done readings and met people who had midheaven in Cancer who were homemakers, interior designers, architects, what was it? Housekeeping, housekeeping for, hotel rooms. It seems like there's not any kind of discrimination when it comes to, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes when you have midheaven in Cancer, you're doing something involving home and family, working with the home, working from home, working in other people's homes, building homes, designing homes. It could be a lot of things. You do have Libra rising, so that does show that you could have like a flair for aesthetics, an eye for aesthetics and design. But again, this is kind of conflicting because, yes, you have Cancer midheaven, but then you have all these other placements showing that you don't want to stay at home. You want to be out in the world doing things. So Cancer midheaven can also make you an excellent manager, an excellent leader. This may seem backward, but Cancer is the sign of the mother. In a way, the mother is kind of like the manager or leader of the home domestically, at least traditionally speaking. So this is kind of the energy that you bring to your career, to your workplace. You can actually be a little bit, I don't want to say maternal necessarily, but nurturing, let's just say. You can create a work environment that is safe and comfortable for others. That's pretty common with Cancer midheaven. Okay, but yeah, what would you be doing? There's definitely this really strong need for autonomy that we talked about. Definitely being in the limelight, being in public is the biggest thing, I think, for you. I think it would be a waste not to use that charisma, which I think you have. I think it's very strong for you. You're very ambitious too, so whatever you're doing, you can quickly rise up the ranks. You may start out at a low position, but quickly rise up at whatever you're doing. But yeah, something to do with, you're so captivating. You have such passion and charisma. I would think it would be something like that. I keep just thinking of actor or something, or musician, some kind of performer. But it could be, you do look like you could run your own business. I do say that to kind of a lot of people in these readings, but some people are meant to do something on their own, and some people are more happy, going with the flow. For you, I really do think you could do something on your own because, again, you're meant to be a leader in some capacity. You're meant to stand out. You're meant to do your own thing. that's really all I can say. So anything, anything with attention, anything where you're working with people, that would be the main thing. I did kind of give that spiel about working with homes. I think that's secondary to the publicity side of things, though. That's what really stands out in your chart. Could have to do with home or homes, but the main thing is publicity. It could be family related, but maybe not. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about romantically. Who would you best work with romantically? We'll go through the different signs you may be attracted to, or which ones you'd not be attracted to, and then we'll talk about kind of what I see as the ideal relationship for you. What would that kind of look like? So let's start out with Mars. Mars is in Scorpio. This indicates, this combined with your fire placements indicate you likely have a very high sex drive. So you may be very sexual in nature. And Mars also represents who you're attracted to in that kind of way. So for you, it would be someone, you're attracted to someone very instinctual, very deep, someone who's like maybe a little bit emotional and deep, instinctual, very passionate, a little bit fiery. I know Scorpio is a water sign, but it's ruled by Mars that, if anyone who knows people with strong Scorpio energy, they're fiery. They're watery too. Water is having to do with emotion. So someone who's both, someone who's very emotional but also passionate and outgoing and confident. Someone who's very strong-willed. That's what's going to be very attractive for you. I do think it somewhat fits with the rest of your chart. On the one hand, if you work with people who either have strong Scorpio themes, so really deep, intense, emotional, passionate, ambitious, either someone who embodies those themes or maybe someone who literally has strong Scorpio placements, you'll relate to them because you have Sun in Cancer. So both of you will be emotional, sensitive. You'll be kind of guarded about certain things. And you may be very kind of touchy-feely, very, water signs typically like a lot of touching interaction that way, romantically. So, that would work very well. They'd also be kind of fiery and competitive, and it looks like you would be too since you have fire placement. So all that checks out really well with Scorpio. The struggle, though, would be with your Leo placements. You have Mercury in Leo and even more importantly, Venus in Leo. This means that Venus in Leo indicates the way you approach relationships is, you want them to be fun. You want to have fun with whoever you're working with romantically. And you are a lot of fun when you're engaging in romantic relationships. So you have this kind of lively, freedom-loving, outgoing, almost kind of childlike approach to relationships. So if you do work with someone, if you're involved with someone who has Scorpio placements like this, there would be a lot of attraction, probably a lot of mutual attraction, and it may be very passionate. But they are much more selective. They're much more guarded. They're more private. They're not as just freedom-loving and fun-loving and let's just, have a bunch of fun. They're more intense. They feel so strongly that they have to be guarded with that level of feeling. And so basically what I'm getting at is Scorpio, on the one hand, you could relate a lot. It could definitely work to some degree. Definitely a lot of passion there. But there could be also a lot of intense fighting, disagreements, jealousy, rage. And once you're locked into this, you really be locked in because you have Venus in Leo and Mars in Scorpio. So you're a committer. When you're attracted to someone, you really want to commit to them. You get stuck on them. You're not one to just walk away from relationships. And someone who has strong Scorpio placements, they are that way too. They want to commit. So on the one hand, it could work out to some extent, but on the other hand, there's also a really high potential for intense fighting, a roller coaster, ups and downs, a lot of intensity between the two of you, and neither of you would want to break it off. It kind of just keeps going. So So that's kind of like a warning, I guess. You definitely could have, a happy relationship with the right Scorpio if they have the right other placements in their chart. But as a sign, I would be wary of Scorpio. I'm not saying that in general for everyone. Of course, I'm saying that for you specifically because of the way your placements are. Okay, but yeah, that was mostly about Mars. Talking more about Venus. So, again, fun loving, freedom loving. You want to be autonomous. Of course, that is, it's there in the rest of your personality, but that goes with relationships too. You want to be independent, and you want your partner to be independent as well, whoever you're with. So, someone who would work with those energies very well would, of course, be Leo people. They will feel the same way about these types of things, and they'll be very fun, very outgoing, very happy-go-lucky, and very adventurous, so Leo would be a great sign. You also have Mercury in Leo, so you're going to relate to them really well. You can communicate very effectively with them. Leo is a fire sign just like Aries, so in other words, someone who has strong Leo energy, they're going to understand you deep down because they're a similar energy that your moon is in. So Leo looks like a really good match. It does kind of clash with Cancer a little bit, but there are some similarities in the sense that family and pride are very important to both Cancer and Leo. So far, Leo looks like the main sign that you would not only be very attracted to, but you could also be friends with them, understand them, and maybe have true deep understanding, and maybe something long term. Could be I could see Leo being great for friendship or something romantic for you. Okay, but what I look to even more so than Mars or Venus is the descendant. So for you, descendant is an Aries. You are Libra rising, so this means that typically the way this would go is that you would be very kind of easygoing, go with the flow, adaptable, malleable, not so outspoken. That would typically be what Libra rising is. Now you have all these other fire placements though, which suggest that you are outspoken, you're very strong-willed. But when it comes to initiating, you can sometimes prefer the other person to actually initiate romantically. Maybe. I'm going out on a limb there. So having descendant in Aries, that would indicate that you're attracted to Aries like a magnet. This could literally be someone who has Aries placements. It can also just be someone who embodies Aries traits. So someone who is independent, outgoing, expressive, decisive, strong-willed, maybe a bit impulsive at times, definitely very spontaneous. What else? Maybe someone who's a little bit self-centered. That's not always a bad thing because that egocentrism is what allows them to be so confident and outgoing and so decisive. They may see things as very black and white. So I'm saying all this, and really you would relate to all this too because of your moon in Aries and your Leo placements. You are fiery, passionate, charismatic as well. So to me, it looks like your chart is situated so that you're definitely attracted to someone else who's passionate like you are, really. You're attracted to someone else who's also, maybe someone you can kind of compete with a little bit. Someone who is also very independent, very ambitious, very outgoing, very outspoken. Someone who's a leader in some kind of way. Someone who's successful. That I think that's what's attractive for you. And not only just attractive, but that's, that you're really going to work. Generally speaking, you're going to work well in the long run with someone of that nature as well. Okay, so definitely Leo or Aries. Those are the signs I would say you have the most compatibility with. Sagittarius to a lesser extent. Sagittarius is also going to be fiery and passionate, so that could definitely work. But they'll also be a little bit detached and intellectual, which is kind of just, I don't think it's something that you're necessarily craving. You're more craving someone who's, on fire, someone passionate. You don't necessarily need that detachment, I don't think. So maybe Sagittarius, but I'm mostly looking at Leo and Aries. Those are also the most outgoing, most confident fire signs, more so than Sagittarius. And I think that's what you're looking for. You really want confidence. Yeah, someone else who enjoys the chase, someone who's like, the hunter, the warrior archetype. Okay, so that's the main thing I see for your compatibility, but let's kind of quickly run through the other elements here. So we already talked about Scorpio. Let's talk about the other water signs. Pisces, I really don't see working. You likely won't relate a whole lot to them because Pisces is a very kind of directionless sign. They can be here, they can be there. Everything is kind of up in the air, so to speak. Everything's changing all the time. You do have Sun in Cancer. You can be sensitive at times. You can be emotional, but you also have all these fire placements. So generally speaking, you're very sure of yourself. You see things as black and white. This is what allows you to be so confident and decisive and straightforward. Someone who's Pisces just won't be like that at all. I just don't. I just don't see that as being interesting, or I don't see either of you really desiring what the other one is in that area. Cancer, there could be some potential. You, of course, have Sun in Cancer, so working with someone else who has Cancer placements, you will relate to each other very, more readily, perhaps, than other signs. I do want to mention, though, I think I mentioned this earlier, that you aren't necessarily like the typical Cancer. You're much more forthright, fiery, outgoing, passionate. So many Cancers will actually be too sensitive for you. They are very emotional, so you could be offensive to them. You may be too blunt, too straightforward. So on the one hand, other people who have Cancer placements, they may relate to you to some extent, but on the other hand, you could be too forthright for them, too fiery, too spontaneous. This would make people who have water placements like Cancer and Pisces, they want to be grounded because they're so emotional. And you are not necessarily grounding. You're more inspiring. Like, you want to take action. You're great for provoking others to take action. I think that's, the beauty of your chart. You're not necessarily going to be the best bet for someone who wants to just settle down and be grounded and be cozy. So that's where I think definitely Pisces I don't see working. Cancer maybe, but also, I think most Cancer people, it wouldn't be attractive for either of you. Scorpio, Mars is there like we talked about, so there's that maybe sexual chemistry, and Scorpio is a lot more fiery and ambitious than Cancer or Pisces. So really, I'm looking, with the water signs, I'm looking at Scorpio more so than Cancer or Pisces. But again, like I mentioned, just be wary of that because it could bring a lot of conflicts, because of your Leo placements. Okay, and then let's talk about Earth signs. So you really you lacked water in the chart, generally speaking, but you really lack Earth in the chart. You have no Virgo or Taurus placements, and then only Jupiter and Capricorn. That's your only Earth planet. Okay, so this basically means that you may feel very ungrounded at times. It may be difficult for you to do mundane things like, take care of, take out the trash, go to work, especially at a job that is not very exciting. It's kind of mundane. I don't think it would really fly for you. I know this doesn't specifically have to do with compatibility, but, lacking that Earth element, you may not necessarily always be the most responsible or practical person necessarily. That's not your strength. So working with someone else, involving yourself with someone who is Earth, on the one hand, when we lack an element, it can sometimes be attractive. I don't know how attractive it would be for you, though, because you're really looking for someone else who's similar to you. You want someone else outgoing, like we talked about. But there could be an off chance that someone who's very earthy is just so cool, calm, and collected, so down-to-earth, practical, hardworking. You may each have something that the other lacks. They may be more, cool, calm, grounded than yourself, and you may be more energetic, more ambitious, more lively, more creative, more spontaneous. So there can sometimes be, opposites attract, complementary relationships, but they would require, especially romantically, it would require a lot of mutual understanding, a lot of maturity from both parties. I think in the long run, it's very difficult to maintain when you are that different from someone. So earth signs in general, I really don't see working. They're just not, they're not similar to you, and you're not desiring that, I don't think, for the most part. You may have some earth sign friends that you can work with, and each of you have such different strengths that you can collaborate, and that can be really great with earth sign friends, coworkers, acquaintances, things like that. But romantically, I don't think that would work, really. I don't know how else to say it. And that really goes for all of them. Definitely Virgo, because that would be the most intellectual, most adaptable earth sign. They would probably relate to you even less than Taurus or Capricorn. Capricorn's going to be ambitious like you are, but all these signs are so modest, so humble. They're very slow. They're very gradual in how they approach things. You are so forthright, so immediate. I just don't think there's a connection there. Okay, and then lastly, talking about the air signs, you do have Libra rising, of course. That's a major placement in the chart. But other than that, there's Pluto in Libra, but then no other air signs at all. You really do have a lot of fire and water planets. That's where the main focus is for you. So air signs, again, you're not going to relate a whole lot. There is that same dynamic of, it could be opposites attract. You could, bring something to the table that the other lacks. But again, same, just like with earth signs, it's going to require a lot of mutual understanding and maturity, again, from both people, especially for close relationships. Just like I said with the earth signs, again, air signs may be great for, friends, acquaintances, coworkers, especially because they're going to be very detached and intellectual. They're going to be great when it comes to thinking things through. They're going to be kind of quirky. So, if you want to think outside the box and connect with someone who is more detached, they could help you to realize, you don't have to be so serious about everything all the time. You can kind of lay back, take everything with a grain of salt. That's the lesson that air signs could bring to you. And you could bring to them the lesson that, sometimes you do need to be serious. It's the exact opposite. Sometimes, you could help them to find their passions, kind of, because air signs can sometimes lack passion because of their detachment. You, on the other hand, are very different. You're very aware of how you feel, what you desire. So, they can help you be a little bit more detached. You can help them be more feeling, be more passionate. So yes, there is that dynamic, but for long-term romantic situations, it's gonna be difficult to manage for sure. You do have Libra rising, so Libra more so than the other air signs you may connect with and be maybe friends with more so. But especially romantically, I don't see it working really. Gemini, I think, is the least compatible air sign because like Pisces, they're directionless. They're very adaptable. They go with the flow. It's just so different from how you are. I just don't see that working at all. Aquarius could maybe work a little more. They're still going to be aloof and detached, so that may not work in itself, but they will also be strong-willed and more consistent. They'll be more of a committer. So that could be interesting for you. Again, it would definitely be an opposites attract relationship, though. The main difference, I think, between you and Aquarius would be they don't feel comfortable expressing feelings, and you look like you're more than comfortable expressing how you feel. So it could work in a kind of opposites attract way. You being very expressive could allow them to kind of hang back. But, like I said, I don't think that's what you're wanting, though. I think you're wanting someone else who's equally expressive, outgoing, like you are. Okay. So that's pretty much what I see with your chart. Let me kind of just look around, make sure I didn't miss anything. I think I'm going to leave off there. That's pretty much what I see. But really interesting stuff. Especially this chart is just so different than the last chart I read. So really interesting to kind of take things in a whole different direction. But okay. But hopefully that's interesting or helpful for you. But thanks for the opportunity to read your chart. Have a great day.